Think about that relationship you really thought was, well, forever. And then suddenly it just isn't.
Hmm.
That slow fade, or maybe it's quicker, but the unraveling, it stirs up so much, doesn't it? Sadness, yeah, confusion, maybe even, honestly, a tiny bit of relief sometimes. It's just so human.
It really is. The end of a big relationship, it shapes so many of us. Leaves
Mhm.
a real mark on how we see ourselves and others too.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today on the deep dive, the real nuts and bolts of when love fades and things end. We're not digging into gossip, but exploring this really thoughtful talk between Tassimin Niem, he's a Buddhist teacher, and Thuimin from Vietcetera's Yulan
Which
series.
translates beautifully to love heals.
Doesn't it? Yeah, and that kind of perspective is exactly what we need.
Yeah, our whole exploration today, it comes from parts of a YouTube transcript where they really dig into how love progresses,
Hmm.
especially that point where the initial intensity kind of fades and relationships wrap up.
And what makes this one so, well, insightful is that Thuman talks very openly about her own recent experience. Ending a 9-year relationship, they had a child together.
Wow, yeah.
And then you have Simon Nim offering his perspective. He spent nearly, 20 years listening to couples, plus his background in psychology and Buddhist practice. It's quite a combination.
Absolutely. And for you listening in, bringing that curiosity about, the human condition,
Yeah.
this deep dive is a chance to look at a really common life event through a different lens.
We'll try to unpack why relationships end, the messy bits of navigating what comes after. Maybe even find some surprising ideas about love itself along the way.
Yeah, we'll look at the different views from both Suimin and Theminium, trying to give you a really rounded picture. So, where do we kick off? Theminium brings up this core idea pretty early: impermanence, or Vuthum in Buddhist terms.
Right. Boothun.
And what's really interesting is how this fundamental Buddhist idea connects to something so personal like our romantic relationships. Tharimenik basically says everything is always moving,
Yeah.
always changing. Not just the world, but our feelings, our bodies, us. So think about how that plays out in a relationship.
Oh, totally. That crazy intense feeling you have at the start. The butterflies, it's amazing, but it's not meant to stay at that exact pitch forever, is it?
Exactly. People grow, their ideas change. What they need from someone else can shift, sometimes in ways you don't even notice at first.
Mm-hmm.
And Tani Menin points out this thing where when we first meet someone, we often show them the polished version, right? Our best version.
The Instagram version.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And over time, as you get closer, that naturally softens. You see the real, authentic person more.
Which, they mention, means when it ends, the loss feels like two things. You're not just grieving the actual person, but also that first, almost perfect image you fell for.
Yeah, like mourning that potential, that ideal.
And Thurman adds something sharp here, how during the breakup itself, all the negative stuff suddenly seems huge.
Right. It's like a defense mechanism, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The mind trying to justify the decision, maybe. Make leaving feel less awful.
Yeah, the head catching up with the heart. Now, they also talk about different types of love, like distinguishing between that first rush, the attraction, the excitement, and something deeper, a meaning of love. What's that deeper stuff about?
They really stress that this deeper love, it's built on shared values, like the core things that guide how you live.
Okay.
It's about character aligning and wanting the same kind of long-term thing, walking through life together, supporting each other.
That makes sense, like a difference between a roller coaster ride and building a house together.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So, if that's the case, why do even those deeper connections sometimes break down? What reasons do they discuss for that?
Well, they suggest relationships that are mostly running on just physical attraction or maybe trying to fill some emotional void. Those tend to be a bit more fragile long term.
Right, because those initial drivers might not adapt as easily.
Exactly. They're powerful, but maybe less flexible when people inevitably change, like we were saying.
But what about those relationships that do have that deeper foundation, like Thuimin's 9 years? Why do those end? And why is that kind of breakup so hard?
Feminian says it's hard precisely because the attachment is so deep. After years together, your lives are just tangled up.
Mm-hmm.
Shared history, habits, maybe even a shared identity. Ending it can feel like cutting off a part of yourself, literally.
And Thuimin brings up something relatable, too, this idea of your personal taste changing. Not that anyone did anything wrong, but just what you found amazing in once doesn't quite fit who you are now. Ever felt that?
Well, definitely.
Yeah.
It's part of growing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our needs, our desires, they shift. Sometimes it's hard to even pinpoint why. It's that impermanence thing again, just showing up in a different way.
Yeah. And Timon adds another interesting concept, tamtham. Roughly translates to greed or maybe craving. How does that fit in? It sounds like more than just wanting something new.
He describes it as this deeper dissatisfaction, this yearning for something else, something perceived as better, even when you're still in the relationship. It's not always about another person either. It could be just a restlessness, maybe chasing some idealized future that isn't real. And unfortunately, that can lead to things like infidelity, where that shiny new feeling overshadows the commitment you have. It kind of eats away at contentment.
That's quite subtle. Now, changing gears slightly, they also talk about outside pressures, especially in the Vietnamese context. What kind of societal stuff do they mention?
Yeah, they talk about how in Vietnam, there's often strong pressure from family and society about marriage, about keeping relationships stable. Upholding the family image is a big deal.
Okay. And how does that pressure affect couples who might naturally be drifting apart? Does it keep them together when maybe they shouldn't be?
It definitely can. That pressure might make couples stick it out even when the love's gone. Now, sometimes maybe that endurance allows space for things to get better, for reconciliation.
But
But it can also just mean people are suffering quietly for a long, long time, staying together but deeply unhappy.
and then there's the huge factor of kids, the whole stay together for the children idea. We definitely need to circle back to how kids are affected.
Absolutely.
But first, just the act of separating. What makes it so hard beyond the obvious heartache?
Well, Thuymin talks really honestly about fearing judgment from others, disappointing family. That's a massive barrier for some people.
Yeah, it's not just your
Yeah.
feelings, it's everyone else's projected onto you.
Exactly. And then there's the internal stuff, right? Facing yourself, facing being alone after sharing your life so closely with someone. That's huge.
Really daunting.
Yeah, the routines, the shared identity we mentioned, the emotional safety net, untangling all that feels incredibly destabilizing.
It's interesting they touch on how society's changing to internet, remote work, maybe more individual focused. Does that make separating easier or harder? What was their take?
Thuymin's experience suggests it might actually make it cut deeper in some ways. Even with more individual freedom, when you've built a life with shared finances, kids, long-term plans, the entanglement is so practical and deep that pulling apart is incredibly painful.
So the practical stuff makes it even harder, potentially.
Yeah, the level of integration just creates more loss, more things to sort out.
And what about gender? Do men and women experience separation differently, according to society's view at least? Are those old expectations still around?
You know, traditionally, maybe there's this idea that men just move on easier while women fear being alone or judged more.
Right.
But Tuthi Manin really pushes back on that. He offers a much more nuanced picture. He says lots of men struggle deeply with the decision, with the aftermath. Some even avoid making the decision, even if they're unhappy.
So it's not so black and white.
Not at all. It really reminds us these are individual experiences, way beyond those old gender stereotypes.
That's such an important point. Okay, let's pivot to that really tough topic, the impact on children. So many conflicting ideas about what's best. What does the Niemann say?
He tackles that classic question head on. Is it better for kids to be in a house with unhappy parents or in separate homes where parents might be happier?
And his view?
He leans toward the latter. He really emphasizes that kids are like emotional sponges, you know. They pick up on everything, constant tension, unhappiness. Even if it's unspoken, it creates a really unstable, damaging environment for them.
That feels right. A house full of silent war is stressful. So what advice do they give parents trying to co-parent after splitting?
The absolute key, they stress, is maintaining respect and cooperation. Even if the romance is dead, you have to be a united front for the kids.
Show them security.
Exactly. It shows the kids that even though mom and dad aren't a couple anymore, they're still a team when it comes to parenting, still committed to their well-being.
And how important is it to actually talk to the kids about it? It must be tempting to just shield them.
Oh, it's crucial. They really underline the need for open, honest communication, age-appropriate, obviously. Tell them what's happening. And they also suggest getting professional help for the kids if they're struggling with the adjustment. That can be a huge help.
Thuy Min shared something quite moving, didn't she? About friends whose parents split and the kids were the last to really understand what was going on.
Yes. And that really highlights the trust issue. If kids sense something's wrong, but no one's telling them the truth, it can really damage their trust, Makes the whole thing harder when it does come out.
And it's not just the parents influencing things, right? Thuyimin mentioned extended family, like grandparents, sometimes making kids feel, I don't know, disadvantaged
Yeah,
because of the split.
and that external narrative can be so harmful. Kids start feeling like there's something wrong with them or their family because of how the adults around them are reacting.
Reflects the adult's discomfort more than the kid's reality.
Exactly. It just shows how important it is for all the adults in a child's life to be supportive and send a consistent positive message.
It really does take a village, especially then. Okay, let's talk about managing those really difficult feelings after a breakup. The anger, the blame, and trying to keep respect, especially with kids involved.
Kazumin Niem acknowledges that talking negatively about an ex is pretty common. It's almost like emotional self-defense,
Like you're building your case, trying to feel okay about the ending.
something like that. But his advice on handling it while still being respectful, especially for the kids,
Yeah.
he suggests trying to reframe it. Think of it less as someone being to blame and more like the Duyin, that sort of karmic connection or shared path, just came to its natural end.
Duyin, that's a gentler way to see it.
It is. And he encourages remembering the good things about the relationship and the value the other person still has, especially as a parent in your children's eyes.
Focusing on the natural cycle of things. So practically, how do you deal with your own pain without dumping it on the kids?
Find other outlets, healthy ones. Talk to friends, get therapy, exercise, hobbies, whatever. Lets you process those feelings safely away from the children.
Right. Keep that separate. And what about looking back? Reflection.
Yeah, he suggests taking time to think about what you learned, the good experiences you did have, and also acknowledging what your ex-partner contributed, the sacrifices they made too. It helps create a more, balanced feel.
Because it's so easy just to focus on the bad stuff when it ends poorly.
Totally. Our brains kind of default to that negativity bias. So he talks about consciously trying to cultivate gratitude for the good times. And he mentions meditation, too, as a way to focus on positive values and sort of gently work through the difficult stuff over time.
Okay, now let's flip the perspective. What about being the person who gets broken up with? The one who didn't choose it? They suggest that feels pretty different, right?
Yeah, they point out the timeline of pain is often really different. The person who initiated might have been thinking about it, rationalizing it for a while, and then the emotions hit later.
Whereas the person being left.
It's often
Ugh.
just, bam, immediate
Duh.
shock, pain, confusion, overwhelming.
And PC Menu offers a really interesting, almost empowering thought for the person left behind. What was that again?
He says, they have returned your life to you.
Wow.
It's a powerful reframe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shifting from loss to opportunity, a chance to rediscover yourself, focus on self-love, design your own future now.
Takes it from victimhood to agency. That's huge. And he really stresses self-love during that time.
Absolutely. He basically says, look, being loved by someone is great, but the most vital relationship is the one you have with yourself. Even the best partner has to look out for their own well-being first. Realizing that can actually be freeing.
What kinds of feelings might that person grapple with, though? It's got to be more than just sadness.
Oh, for sure. Feeling devalued, abandoned, maybe betrayed, losing that emotional support, that security, feeling really uncertain about what comes next. It's a whole complex mix.
But there's healing in there, too. Potential for growth. It's not just devastation.
Definitely not. Tessie Menes talks about our natural resilience, the process of healing, rediscovering your own strength after a breakup. It's a journey, for sure, a journey of rebuilding.
And what about getting back together? Did they touch on that?
They acknowledge it's possible if the core issues are dealt with and if both people have genuinely grown and changed.
Big ifs.
Very big ifs. They caution that just sliding back into the old ways without real change probably won't lead to anything lasting or healthy.
Right. Now, they also kind of zoomed out a bit, thinking about love beyond just romantic couples. What other forms of love did they explore?
They talked about how love can change shape, like maybe still loving someone deeply even if you can't be partners anymore, accepting a long-distance thing, or even in some really evolved situations, accepting their involvement with someone else. You're seeing that as a more selfless, less possessive kind of love.
That's a very different level of love. They also mentioned external things interrupting love, like war, historically. Today's pressures aren't usually that extreme, but outside stuff definitely plays a role, right?
It does, absolutely. But Tassim and Neem suggests that while those external stressors add pressure, often the main reason relationships end comes down to internal shifts, changes within the people themselves.
Which just underscores how vital ongoing communication and understanding are. How can couples navigate those changes together instead of letting them pull things apart?
They really emphasize partners needing to actively support each other through challenges, empathy, encouragement, understanding that people do change.
Hmm.
Talking openly about those shifts is key to navigating them as a team.
Yeah, relationships aren't static, they need work. They also drew a distinction between grieving a partner lost suddenly, like in an accident, versus the pain of betrayal. What was the difference there?
They suggested that while both are incredibly painful losses, a sudden, unexpected death often leaves the good memories intact. You can hold on to a positive image.
Whereas betrayal,
Betrayal brings in anger, resentment. It can make you question everything, even taint or erase the good times you shared. The nature of the grief is different.
that really resonates. Now, near the end, they shared a story that offered a really different take on loss. Can you remind us about that?
Yes, it was quite beautiful. The story of an 84-year-old biology professor whose wife had passed away years before. He kept her room exactly as she left it, and he felt her presence still in his daily life,
How so?
through their memories, through their children,
Hmm?
even feeling her influence within himself.
Wow. That's such a testament to enduring connection. How does that tie into Buddhist thought?
It's a perfect example of Votung, this idea of seeing beyond the physical body, connecting with someone's essence, their spirit, their shared values.
So the connection doesn't just vanish when the person is gone.
Exactly. It can continue in memory, in values, in the impact they had on you. And understanding that can bring a lot of comfort, reduce that feeling of being utterly alone.
It suggests our minds, our own capacity for love, can help us transcend that raw pain of loss, maybe find a deeper meaning.
Precisely. They wrap up that point saying that love, all its forms, even when it involves loss, really pushes us to grow, deepens our understanding, and ultimately makes life richer.
And then they came back around, full circle to impermanence again, but linking it to new beginnings after endings.
Yeah, reiterating that Buddhist view, nothing is fixed, everything flows. So seeing a relationship end not as a final stop, but as a transition, a shift to a different state, that can bring acceptance, maybe even hope.
And their final message, for listeners maybe going through this right now, thinking about it, or dealing with the aftermath.
The main encouragement is to seek inner peace, that yulan, that healing love, and really practice self-compassion through what's often an incredibly tough time.
And Tasimin Niem had one last powerful reflection, didn't he?
Yeah.
About suffering itself.
Yes. He said, we don't want it. It hurts, obviously.
Hmm.
But suffering often brings crucial lessons. It forces growth, pushes us to understand ourselves better, and can actually lead to healthier relationships down the line.
Because challenges make us dig deep.
Exactly. They force us to reconnect with our survival instincts, rethink things, adapt. He suggests those who really learn from adversity often come out stronger, wiser.
It's a really potent thought that even in endings, there's so much potential for learning and new beginnings.
Absolutely.
Well, we really hope this deep dive, looking at the end of relationships through the insights of Tonti Minyem and Tuimin's reflections, has given you, our listeners, some food for thought, maybe a wider perspective on these really human moments. What parts of this resonated most with you? Or are there other angles on this you'd like us to explore sometime? We'd love to know. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive.